The village of Hornby, which has nothing to do with the manufacturers of toy trains, at least I don't think it has, straddles the confluence of the rivers Wenning and Lune, 9 miles from Lancaster, which is why there's an impressive weir thundering away below the bridge. Not because it's 9 miles from Lancaster, obviously, because it's on the confluence. I could have phrased that better. Hornby is one of those timeless North Lancashire villages where the residents still wear tank tops and greet complete strangers in the street as old acquaintances, even if they're not. A village comprised of old stone cottages and Elizabethan architecture. It's almost picture perfect if you ignore the road that runs through its heart, which is difficult unless you remove the soundtrack and add some countryside sound effects like what I did. It's overlooked by the even more timeless castle. Well, it's medieval, actually, repurposed and redesigned over the centuries by what appears to be the Disney Corporation. No doubt said castle groans beneath the weight of its own intense history. No doubt. Unfortunately, it's privately owned and commoners such as us aren't allowed any closer than the gatehouse. It's a good gatehouse, mind, though probably not as interesting as the castle itself. I suspect that Hornby Castle is copyrighted, so Sodom. Let's take a gander at St. Margaret's Church instead. St. Margaret's was erected circa 1338, which is about 20 to 2 in the afternoon. Not the oldest place of worship in Lancashire by a long chalk, but it does have plenty of ancient folk art sprouting from its exterior. According to the history books, the tower was built in 1514 by Sir Edward Stanley. You'd think these aristocrats would pay some builders to do the job for them, wouldn't you? There's a bell dating from 1296 hanging from its rafters, just begging to be rung. But Hornby's the sort of village that's so out of touch with the modern world, the residents would probably think there was an air raid on and panic. The church has withstood actual attacks over the course of its history. The bullet wounds of Oliver's army still pepper the walls. Unfortunately, we forgot to film them. There's a 6-foot pyramidal Saxon cross base outside as well, once carved with figures now greatly faded, which we also forgot to film in close-up. Back inside the tower, you'll find 3 more fragmented Saxon crosses, believed to have originated in some nearby long-lost abbey or other. To be honest, they look older than Saxon to us. One of them appears to be Roman, and the little one that resembles a cottageware teapot bears a striking similarity to the hogback in Heysham. But we're not experts, so we'll leave it at that. Segueing back to those musket ball scars that we didn't film, Hornby's seen more than its fair share of conflict over the centuries, dating back to the harrying of the north and beyond. There's a motte-and-bailey on the outskirts of the village. What do you mean, what's a motte-and-bailey? Oddly enough, that's just what the bloke outside the post office said when we asked him where it was. For those who don't know then, a motte-and-bailey was a defensive structure built by the conquering Normans in the 11th century. It consisted of a motte, i.e. an artificial mound crowned by a fortified tower, and, as you've probably worked out, a bailey, i.e. an enclosure at the base of said tower surrounded by a ditch, where the general business of the guards' daily lives was conducted. Back in 1069, when William the Bastard declared himself King of England, unlike our soft southern cousins, us Viking-related northerners were having none of it. Lancastrians have never been massive fans of the monarchy, to be honest. Rebellion was in the air. And so began the harrying of the North, the most brutal, destructive and bloody genocide in the whole of British history. It doesn't get mentioned much on history documentaries because, well, it wasn't in London, but it was a right old bloody mess, believe me. The war, because that's what it was, involved looting, arson, murder, scorched earth tactics, and starvation. More than 75% of the population ended up dead, and there were a lot of motte-and-baileys. Little wonder then that when the Doomsday Book came to be collated, most of Lancashire was written off as waste. You'll find motte-and-baileys all over the place round these parts, from Halton to Whittingham, showing the strength of feeling on both sides. Hornby's motte-and-bailey goes by the name of Castle Stead, suggesting that it was repurposed from an earlier Iron Age fort. Saxons always called prehistoric earthworks castles because they didn't know what they were. In fact, it was such an excellent defensive position, it was repurposed again as the site of a pillbox during the Second World War. A pillbox being a bunker for snipers, incidentally, and not a building for containing Nurofen. The adjoining bridge is medieval, but there's more signs of Norman activity in nearby Gressingham. Gressingham isn't much of a village, it's more of a chocolate box encounter with several old cottages. Me and Jeannie McIntosh stumbled across it during one of our We've Taken the Wrong Bloody Turning Again excursions. Apparently the place is most famous for its ducks, I've never heard of them, which don't live there anymore because they've all migrated to East Anglia or something. Gressingham's church, on the other hand, aka St. John the Evangelist, dates from the 12th century and has an impressive Norman doorway at its rear, complete with mason's marks and chevrons. Actually, Michelle suggested that said marks might be carvings to ward off evil spirits. Back in those days, country folk were simple, superstitious and inbred, so no change there then. There are another couple of Saxon cross fragments inside the church. Not a bad find for taking a wrong turn. This happens quite a lot when Jeannie McIntosh is driving. Right, I'm not going to bother with the usual subscribe stuff because it doesn't seem to make much difference. Just be sure to return here next week, same time, same place, for another Lancashire Footnote.